Right, wow, interesting. I tell you, all this tech stuff gets to be a little bit too much for me sometimes. In 1940, you have to remember the time frame and listen to some of this about the story I'm about to tell you, because I think this is a pretty phenomenal story. Maybe some of you know, in 1940, Wilma Rudolph was born prematurely. She weighed 4.5 pounds, 1940, okay? She was born the 20th of 22 children. Now, about then, I think I'd be worn out. I don't know about you, but nonetheless, the Rudolph, their last name were Rudolph, was Edna and Ed and Blanche Rudolph was her parents' name. And since she was born during segregation, there was no hospital available because it was, I guess the word is almost shame, but I don't know that I feel shame, but whites only hospital. So literally she had to take this premature baby home and take care of her herself. And this baby went through everything. Wilma did. She had the measles, the mumps, scarlet fever, chicken pox, and double pneumonia. And it was around the time she was about 2 years old when they noticed that one of her legs was not developing correctly. So again, she took Wilma to the doctor, and the doctor told her, that's it, she's got polio, there's nothing you can do, just put this brace on her leg and go home. She's done. And luckily, after 20 kids, I mean, I just can't imagine the empathy, the continuing energy it must have taken for Blanche to do this for Wilma. She found a hospital in Nashville that did physical education, physical therapy. Started doing this physical therapy with her, drove 50 miles one way just to get there. In the 40s and the 50s, right? 50 miles one way to do this therapy with her daughter, with 20 other kids sitting at home, probably the oldest, wishing she wasn't the oldest, or he. And finally the physical therapy staff liked her so much that they just basically taught her how to do the therapy. So at 12 years old, Wilma found herself that she could finally walk normally. And so she had so admired one of her sisters, and her sister played basketball. So she decided she too would play basketball. She sat on the seat, it was a seat warmer for 3 years. Not once was she called up in those 3 years. This is a girl who could not give up, you know. I mean, it's just an amazing story when you listen to this whole story. So she found herself that she didn't give up, and so finally she started a little bit of basketball here and there, but she found that what she really loved was running. She was really good at running. And so at barely 16, 4 years, think of this, 4 years after the braces came off, in 1956, she won a bronze medal in the Olympics. Okay? 4 years afterwards. But in the meantime, this man named Ed Temple came along. He was the coach for the Tennessee State University, and recruited her for the track team. And she did such a phenomenal job. She was such a phenomenal person, such a big heart of participating, that in 1960 she won a gold medal in Rome. From braces to a gold medal. And she said, the truth of the matter is, she said, all I wanted to do was walk without braces. The truth of the matter is, all I wanted to do was walk without braces. I tell you, as I heard that story, it really touched me deeply, because I was thinking of all the Wilmas who don't go to the Olympics and win medals. All the Wilmas who have situations where they overcome great odds. And we just don't hear very many of their stories. The Wills and the Wilmas. And how we all can wake up and surrender our braces as well. Because the more I thought about that, I thought about how much humanity is propped up so much by the braces of our life, by the braces of worldly things. Not just the brace of financial things, of our jobs and our situational, but how people brace themselves up through alcohol, and drugs, and sex, and all the various ways we distract, the computers, and all the way, and oh my goodness, they're getting even more ways that we can distract ourselves with computers. So my lesson today is about transmutation, which it might sound like a funny way to go, but transmutation is when we really change something from one thing to another. And to me, all of the whole teachings of what this Bible is about, what Jesus came to teach us, what all awakened masters came to teach us, is that we can be changed at depth. So much so that we're not even the same being anymore. We are a Christed being. We are an awake being, as Buddha might have said. So Charles Fillmore wrote this as the founder of, one of the co-founders of Unity. He said, and I like this, it says, according to modern science, the whole universe of forms can be dissolved into energy, from which it may again be formed. Science does not say that the directive and formative power is in man, but the Bible teaches, and especially Jesus. Jesus said all authority was given to him in heaven and on earth, and he manifested this power in small ways by multiplying the loaves and fishes, all the healing, the feeding of 5,000, and the raising of his own flesh. This is Charles Fillmore's idea of transmutation. And it's interesting that he would write this about energy and science back when he wrote it, back in the 30s and 40s, even in the 20s. And so he knew he was always way ahead of his time. And we know that life is just energy, but we get caught up in the worldly aspect of the flesh of these clay bodies, if you will. So I wanted to read one of my favorite stories. I've read it many times. In a way, it's about transmutation, and in another way, it's about something else, but it comes from 2 Kings. Now, the wife of one of the sons of the prophet cried to Elijah, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. But the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be as slaves. And Elijah said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you in the house? So he's asking her, what do you have in consciousness? What do you have willing and ready to be changed at death? And she said, why, your maidservant has nothing. We kind of hear this throughout the Bible. People first asking, do you want to be healed? Well, let me tell you my story before I tell you what I really want, right? Let me get my story out. Do you have anything? No. And yet when we open our eyes, when we're willing to have that transmutation, where we're willing to be changed at depth, we know we have something. So she says, your maidservant has nothing except, I like that. That's just silly me, but except a jar of oil. And then he said, well, go outside and borrow vessels of all your neighbors, empty vessels and not too few. Then go in and shut the door upon yourselves, your son, and pour into all these vessels. And when one is full, set it aside. So she went from him and shut the door upon herself and her sons. And as she poured, they brought the vessels to her. And when the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another. And he said to her, there is not another. And then the oil stopped flowing. And she came to the man of God and said, he said, go and sell this oil and pay your debts, and your son and you shall live on the rest. So at first she has absolutely nothing, right? And yet then, well, I have this little tiny thing. And so when Jesus asks us, Jesus tells us again and again, we can be changed by renewing our minds. I have this little thing called my mind that I can what? Change. And when I change my mind, my whole world changes. My life changes. My outer circumstances changes. Jesus said to be in the world, but not of the world. In other words, you can show up and be present just like the woman was, but so often we focus on what is not there instead of what is there. Well, I have this this full jar that I can even go get more of and fill up and fill up and fill up. And so we need to be in the world, but not of the world. All the way, we think sometimes Whew, I'm sorry. When there's this weather, I get a little that funny thing. There's so many books today on wisdom and awakening, and so many that it's unbelievable. So this writing from 1200 AD speaks to me, and his name is Moses Maimonides. There you go, Lana. Very good. Moses Maimonides from 1200 AD. He writes, "Every time you find in one of our books a tale of reality that seems impossible, a story that is both strange to reason and common sense, then be sure that the tale contains some profound allegory, veiling a deep mystery of truth. And the greater the absurdity of the letter, the deeper the wisdom of the spirit." That's kind of interesting, because I like to think sometimes my silly jokes or my little stories have not absurdity, but have a little thread, if you will, into the material of the whole lesson that speaks. And this is at 1200 AD. He's saying that this wisdom is veiled. In the world, the wisdom is veiled, and we don't always get to see. In fact, we often get a little caught up in what is called the letter of the law. Have you heard this? The letter of the law. In fact, I just heard on the news the other day that the Bible, they're having on one of the History Channel or something, they're having the Bible run, their estimation of what the Bible is. It's the most watched program, I guess, on, what is that kind of TV called? Cable television, period. And I just wanted to put my hands up like this, because I'm thinking of all of the ways that it is depicted. Because it is depicted through the letter of the law, which is the words, right? As opposed to the spirit of the law, the meaning, the greater mystery, what the stories are really trying to get across to us. Just like the story I just told you about the jar, can be, the widow's jar, can be used for abundance. It can be used for transmutation. That story can be used on so many levels for faith, that always things are going to happen. So depending on what day it is, how you read the Bible, what your spirit is on that day, as to what you can get from that story. In fact, we are told the letter killeth, but the spirit gives life. So we're to take the Bible and take it into us, and then discern and sit with it and allow it to speak to us. A rabbi 600 years ago wrote this. He said, "The Torah is the cloak. Do not worship the Torah. Do not worship the cloak. Rather, the person who wears it." Now, is he saying the person who wears it, or the person who personifies it, who lives this? "Woe to the man who sees the Torah as the law only, the simple rituals and ordinary words, because if, in truth, it contained only these, we would be able to compose a much better book today." And I really like that, because the mystery is deeper than that. And so when we know that people can say a lot of things, but in the long run we have to look at their actions. And this is where I'm always humbled. I always come back to, it takes me like 4 steps back whenever I come back into the action part of things, or how I'm acting, or how things are in the world. I always feel like I should be way ahead of myself. Does anybody else feel like you've been practicing for a long time and you still feel like you're stumbling and bumbling and fumbling along a little bit, and that you have these fears, and yet you have faith, but I'm still in this human body? And so I know that I'm on my way, and yet I still get caught up in that, wow, like comparative, I guess, instead of comparative religion, it's comparative Lana to everybody else and how they're doing. When in fact, many people do very well of faking it until they, I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How you doing? And it doesn't quite come from their heart. You can almost feel it. They can speak the words, but it's not in their heart. So this transmutation is a cool word. I like it just by saying it, transmuting things. Because when we look at something, as I've said many, 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 many times, a kernel of corn, I can't say it very well this morning, but kernel of corn. Who would ever believe, by looking at a kernel of corn, that there was a huge corn stalk The possibility of changing from one thing, an egg. When you look at an egg, who would ever think a chicken lives in that egg, right? Or that we could even eat the egg, and well, I won't go there, but so the idea is that things can be transmuted, things can be changed, and we don't always get from the way it looks on the outside. It's not, doesn't prove that that's what is on the inside. Because things can, again, if we look back at Wilma, we would say, well, there's a young girl that's just living in braces, and she doesn't really have much chance in the world, and yet she overcame so much. So again and again we find in the Bible this idea that we are to transmute, to make this word flesh. When we were told to make the word flesh, what do you think that meant? What do you think half of the stories in the Bible, or more than half, were all meant to take from mystery for you to take it and make it into something else. Make it your Sherry. Make it something that speaks to you today, not just to me, but to you, and transmute it, change the form of it, just like it changes from within us. So the wisdom of the day, hopefully we have some today, and we can therefore change it. What I am seeking is seeking me now. What I am seeking is seeking me now. The very wisdom within the kernel of corn, the wisdom within the egg is already there. We have the wisdom, but we have to work with it. We have to allow, again, the Word to become flesh. And the Word comes through us, right? Out into the world in the form. That's how it happens. So we can seek what we want. We can see what we want. We listen deeply to say, is there clarity here? Am I moving in the way of mystery? Maybe I shouldn't say that. I say I love mystery until it comes up, until I'm involved in mystery. And then I want clarity because I just don't like the mystery. But when I trust the mystery, I do like the mystery because I wouldn't be involved in all of this if I didn't truly love mystery, the mystery of it. How it's when I have the faith, when I stand firm, or when I'm in the flow when I'm supposed to be, when I truly listen. Am I supposed to be standing strong? Am I supposed to be in the flow? Is this a time to not know, or is it a time to know? I know then that I'm in that transmutation time period, that time that when things are changing from one thing to the other. Who would have ever guessed when I was doing that christening for that little boy so many years ago that I would be doing his marriage so many years later? I mean, it's just one of those things that you just don't, I don't think about things like that, but it's the point that life is a circle, and probably all of you have seen the Lion King at some point, either on film or on Broadway. And it has such a beautiful message because life is a circle. We're constantly letting go of one thing, whether it's a breath, and getting another. And yet we seem somewhat surprised when those kinds of things happen. This transmutation. I welcome this transmutation in my own life to become what God created me to be. Because at times, even though I've been doing this for a long time, like some of you have been doing some of maybe your creative work or whatever it is you do, and you say, wow, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be doing this anymore. You listen deeply, right? You sit in the silence. You allow the silence to have its way with you. And before too long, messages begin to come to you to say, you are working with this. You are being transmuted. Something different is happening. The form of you, maybe of how you've done it before, isn't going to be the same. But continue on in this way. Continue on in this way. And so I would like to read to you this morning one of the great, if you will, I don't say this word very well, transmutation scriptures. It's about transubstantiation. Beverly, say it out real loud. Transubstantiation. Yeah. Transubstantiation. The two people that yesterday I was married, Alex and Allison, and it was windy and the wind was blowing right through this ear all the way through my head out the other end. I didn't get their names out of my mouth or anything. So let me read first this morning from Matthew 26. Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take, eat, for this is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the forgiveness of all. And I tell you, I shall not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new. So this is about that word communion. Now, I didn't grow up with communion in my life and my background in the church that I went to, but going through the monastery and going through the times of the silent retreat, I found communion deeply meaningful when I finally sat in the silence long enough to have that transmuted wisdom and mystery understanding of what it meant to me, and how you can take it as you take it. And I can understand now, even though I'm not a Catholic, how communion, how the ritual on certain times and certain days would be deeply meaningful to go in and light a candle and have communion on that day, because especially if it has a deeper mystery and meaning. I've watched people through the years at the monastery do this, and they have just such a beatific look on their face. I always wait till the very end. But what Jesus is saying, he's not saying take a part of his flesh. Jesus is gone. How are we going to do that? Drink of his blood. Jesus is taking it again as this idea of changing from one thing to another. Take my works. Take what I have been teaching you. What I have been teaching you, which is the body of my work, right? It is the body of my work, the body of wisdom. It's very simple. Love. Love as you have been loved. This is what Jesus taught us. Love as you have been loved. And then blood. What does blood represent? Blood represents life. You have to it's one thing to hold it in our heads, which is easy to do and have a lot of wisdom and have a lot of understanding. But it's only until we give it the action. We give it the blood energy. It becomes a communion, a common union, a oneness, a unity. We are transmuted. We are changed in our form. The Spirit of God moves in and through us when we truly take the works. In that moment, I am willing to be changed. I am willing to see anew. I am willing to have my mind renewed. In that moment, I am willing to be changed. Truly changed. And when we come to those moments in life when we are really, truly ready to be changed, not, well, let me tell you my story, which is very easy to do, isn't it? Let me tell you my story first, and then accept I've got this jar. Except for how I'm blessed. Except for the many blessings that I have when I pay attention. Boy, that's a huge transmutation, isn't it, when we pay attention to the blessings. That when we take the body of wisdom and give it life, expressing out here, I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world, then no matter what happens, we know that fear is going to come upon us. We're in our human body. Fear will happen to us. But it doesn't mean we can't step over that line of fear. Because oftentimes fear is just here to remind us, I've come up against my comfort zone. Suddenly I'm up against the wall. And guess what? If I practice like Wilma, if I practice and have that readiness to go, then I'm going to be able to take the braces off of my whatever area of my life is braced up. I can take those braces off. I am changed at death. I can face the wonderful whispering of the mysteries of God that call my heart to be different. Call my heart to live the attitudes of being that we're taught. Call my heart to say, this book, the Bible, is meant to be taken spiritually, and it's meant to be taken in a way for you to have your food, if you will, your spiritual food. And it says again and again, fear not. One more step. I can do one more step today. I might not be able to do more than that, but I can step out of my fear zone into the love zone and be changed at death. Please join me in prayer. Thank you, dear God, for reminding me that I have been given all of the gifts of the kingdom, that the heavenly realm lives in me and as me. And as I join in that union of heart, as I join in that union of living from heart and wisdom, then not only am I changed, but I make a difference on this beautiful planet and within me. Thank you, God. Amen. Amen.